Welcome all our friends and followers to another SAMexpert event dedicated to service providers. That's what we do. Today we will compare the two Microsoft licensing programs designed for service providers. The traditional SPLA, Service Provider Licensing Agreement, which has been around for over 20 years, well, nearly 20 years probably, and the CSP-Hosting program, which is relatively new. It's only been in existence for 2 years, but the reason why we made it today's topic is the amount of questions and feedback we get from service providers via our support line, and just the providers that we work with. CSP-Hosting is not fully understood. It has been around for exactly 2 years. It was introduced 2 years ago in October, and it's still not fully understood. There are lots of questions about CSP-Hosting, and many, and unfortunately, unfortunately not all, but many cases, we hear about them almost daily. Resellers, distributors, and Microsoft representatives pitch CSP-Hosting as a replacement for SPLA. So according to them, it's a replacement. It's better than SPLA. It's the future. Some say it's inevitable. You have no choice. Somehow, though, the conversation about the end clients and the end client choices and their comfort with the new model isn't happening, isn't taking place. Am I trying to say that CSP-Hosting is bad? Is it terrible? No, I'm not. It's actually a good addition. Both SPLA and CSP-Hosting have their cons and pros. And today we want to present you with an independent comparison between those programs from a team, our team, that does not benefit from license sales. We're not in the Microsoft ecosystem. We're not a Microsoft partner, which gives us the luxury of speaking from an unbiased, independent point of view. And before we begin, we must address the elephant in the room. This is the most frequent question I get right now from providers that are not following us, that are not listening to us, telling this every time. If someone told you that SPLA is dying and will be discontinued soon, I would put it lightly, it's not particularly true. First of all, Microsoft recently committed to supporting SPLA program for at least 5 more years, until 2029. What will happen after? Nobody knows. I don't want to say unfortunately nobody knows, just nobody knows. Very neutrally. And I'm not sure, and my team is not sure, that Microsoft does either, that they know what they're going to do after 5 years. There are different, being an insider in this industry, we hear various opinions and even rumors, but I would really refrain from speculating today because there's nothing solid, just rumors, just speculations. All we know is that Microsoft did indeed commit in writing recently, when they agreed with CSP in Europe, that SPLA will survive at least another 5 years. And as they have no idea what to replace it with, and don't listen to the tales that CSP-Hosting is the way forward, there may be options. There may be options like Azure Stack HCI for hosters, which is promised, we hope, by about Christmas time, maybe a bit later, maybe by about March next year. This will deduct from SPLA a little bit. We now have SQL Server with Azure Arc, which deducts from SPLA, and it's not a CSP-Hosting product either. It's a very interesting beast. Also, we will have a dedicated webinar next week with an Italian partner, Systematica. But that event is mostly for Italian partners, so I'm not sure. But what we're going to take out of that webinar, we're going to have another event here to discuss SQL Server with Azure Arc as well. So if you're interested in that, please follow us. Please have a look at what we announce in our YouTube lives and our LinkedIn lives. And now let's discuss the current reality, in which we have SPLA and CSP-Hosting. We have both coexisting. Actually, to become a CSP hoster, you have to be a SPLA partner. And let me begin with the story behind CSP-Hosting so you understand it, so it's crystal clear to you what it is, what it stems from. Because understanding of CSP-Hosting from this point of view is crucial. Then, lots of things will start making sense that may not be sensible if you just look at the program guides, or not even look at the program guides, just listen to people advising you about CSP hosting program. 2 years ago, in October 2022, Microsoft introduced the flexible virtualization benefit, the most flexible and exhaustive bring your own license program, bring your own license model for the end client. This is a critical bit. Usually we never expect good news from Microsoft on the licensing front. However, the flexible virtualization benefit was and is a massive improvement for the end clients. See, I'm reiterating this. Please remember this point. It was not made for providers. However, providers can benefit from it as it gives your end clients more flexibility. And if you understand how to combine it with SPLA, if you understand all its risks and benefits, you can improve your end client offerings, your products that you offer. And it's not rocket science either. It's a very simple bring your own license program. Here are the couple of things you just need to know about it. An end client may bring any license on a subscription model or any license with active software assurance to a service provider, any service provider, and deploy that license in a dedicated or private cloud or shared public cloud environment. So do you see how simple this is? There are no product limitations. There are no authorizations you must obtain from Microsoft. Nothing. Any product, any provider, any environment. It's a bring your own license program for the end clients. The only exception to that program is it doesn't work if you are Google, Amazon, Alibaba, or even Microsoft Azure. Now, here is something that may contradict what you may have been told. CSP hosting is not a replacement for SPLA. CSP hosting is an extension of the bring your own license flexible virtualization benefit that gives participating providers a few additional benefits on top of the flexible virtualization benefit. Just a few additional benefits. Most importantly, if your business involves, if you have like a marketplace of virtual machines that you give your clients that from which they may select what machines they want to deploy. They want to deploy it now. You can activate those virtual machines with your own keys, with the keys that you get through the CSP hosting program. Regular providers, which can potentially implement similar functionality, they can't pre-activate virtual machines. They can't provide activated virtual machines. The end client, because end clients need to enter their own keys, and clients need to activate the virtual machines. So see where the difference is. It's really not, for some of you, it's really not that big. For some of you, it may be mission critical if your time to production for the client is your competitive advantage. Secondly, there are a couple of licensing benefits that are only available to end clients of CSP hosters. We'll mention them later, I promise you. I'll discuss them. I have them in my bullet points. So here's the first difference, fundamental difference between SPLA and CSP hosting. In SPLA, the provider, you are the licensee. The provider is the licensee. The license is granted to the provider. It's not sold at any point to the end client. The end client just pays for a service. The end client receives no licenses. In your SPLA billing, you don't even have to mention licenses. You may just give them a single line item with the cost of the service. CSP hosting is fundamentally different. When a client brings their own license, it's pretty straightforward. It's bring your own license. You understand that they bring their own license and host it with you when you're a CSP host. It doesn't require an explanation. What requires an explanation is the option which Microsoft calls license included. When the license is included with the service, that option is completely different from SPLA. You're not using your licenses. It is, in fact, a regular CSP transaction. The client signs a Microsoft customer agreement, an MCA. A license is sold to the client, added to the CSP tenant. And effectively, you're concluding a regular CSP sales transaction. They get a license, even when they take a so-called license included service. So what the CSP hoster program calls license included services should be instead called license bundled services. The license included name is quite misleading because license is not included. It's provided alongside with the service. So from the end client's point of view, there are quite a few, differences between SPLA and license included CSP hosting services. First, from the end client point of view, there is no license transaction as SPLA versus a regular license purchase from a CSP host. Secondly, and importantly for many, the minimal term in SPLA is a calendar month versus at least 1 year in CSP, as you know. Again, I'm not saying that CSP hosting offerings are worse than the SPLA, but these differences must be understood and accounted for. And if an end client is okay with having to manage their licenses, if they are okay with a minimal subscription term of a year, if your typical end client stays with you for at least a year, CSP hosting can even provide cost benefits to the end client. And for example, a very good example would be from our client base, a service provider that provides services to non-profits. Non-profits get no discounts through SPLA, they can get discounts through CSP. And then CSP hosting for them becomes cheaper. The overall total cost of ownership of that service is cheaper, it's lower. Plus, Microsoft obviously rewards CSP sales. If you are not just an infrastructure provider, but you are also an active CSP partner, I don't think I have to explain it to you. You already know that. Nobody rewards for SPLA anymore, but CSP is rewarded because this is kind of the future Microsoft licensing program. Everything is moving that way. On the other hand, if your clients come and go often and require temporary or elastic workloads, SPLA is the most flexible and usually more commercially reasonable to them. Those who come for 1 or 2 months, those who need to deploy quickly something and then shut it down, if they buy an annual CSP license, they get stuck with it. On SPLA, they pay for the months they use it. It's very simple. So it should already be evident to you by this point, and we've been online for 30 minutes already, that CSP hosting is not a replacement for SPLA. I would rather call it an alternative program, or better, I would rather say an additional option. It's an option. It's an add-on to your SPLA. It's by no means it's a one-to-one replacement. There is no one-to-one replacement for SPLA. Let's talk about, as I promised you, let's quickly explore the differences in the licensing models. And those of you who are commercial, please bear with me. I'll try to make it not too complicated right now. So SPLA licensing models are defined in service provider use rights and apply to service providers. On the other hand, CSP hosting licensing rules, because they apply to bring your own license, they are defined in a different document that is called product terms. They apply to end users, not to you. So there are 2 different documents and 2 fundamentally different sets of licensing rules. And let's begin with Windows Server. As you may know, licensing Windows Server in SPLA and SPLA is the simplest of them all. It's really that simple. If you have a host, you have a public cloud infrastructure with multiple virtual machines, you assign the necessary Windows Server data center licenses to the hardware layer and share the cost between all Windows Server virtual machines running in that infrastructure. There is no limit to the number of virtual machines. So again, the costs are applied to the hardware infrastructure, and then they're shared between the virtual machines economically. Windows Server virtual machines only that run in that infrastructure. In CSP hosting, and by the way, flexible virtualization benefit as well, you would most probably, in this scenario, license end client machines with their licenses per virtual machine. And this option per virtual machine is unavailable in SPLA. On the other hand, for scenarios like BYOL, it is the most logical option in a public cloud environment because you're not sharing costs. It's their costs. It's their VMs. And you have an option in that case to license those VMs per virtual machine. Now, what about client access licenses? If you are aware of Microsoft licensing, you don't only have to pay for the basic software, you often have to pay for so-called client access licenses. And it's quite a bit more complicated here. The comparison is not simple. SPLA, the traditional SPLA, only requires client access licenses for remote desktop and rights management services. There's no, if you know on-premises licensing, there is no Windows Server cow in SPLA. Now, if a client brings their own Windows Server license, they must also ensure they have the basic Windows Server cows. It doesn't matter if a provider is a CSP hoster or not. If they bring their own license, they have to have the necessary Windows Server cows, RDS cows, rights management cows, the whole set. What's interesting is that CSP hosters have an interesting benefit here. If a client buys a Windows Server license from a CSP hoster in a license included or license bundle scenario, then the basic Windows Server cows are not required, like in SPLA. So I wish I knew who came up with this brilliant ideas at Microsoft, because managing these differences is too complicated, even for a seasoned Microsoft licensing consultant who does it for a living. Just remembering all these differences and applying them to different licensing programs can become quite a headache unless you have a specialized tool which supports that. And there aren't that many options that you have. Now, what about SQL Server database? It's a bit easier. When SQL Server is licensed per core, there are no differences between the two licensing programs. It's all the same. When, though, SQL Server is licensed per user or device, SPLA doesn't require payments for server instances. You only have to pay for client licenses. However, because CSP hosting licensing is dictated by product terms, that scenario also requires server licenses, which then can make the total cost for the end client, in most cases, higher than in SPLA. And it doesn't matter whether a provider is a CSP host or a client just brings their own licenses through flexible virtualization benefit. There's no difference. Now, let's compare the reporting requirements, because for many of those who haven't yet stepped on the path of CSP hosting, it's a question of, okay, so what do we have to do? What are the reporting requirements? I'll explain this. It's really not rocket science. So I'll start with SPLA. SPLA, as you may know, requires you to report total license consumption each calendar month. You've done that, those of you who are SPLA providers, you've done that for years, nothing's changed. You know the drill. And the reasoning here is logical of this reporting. You have to pay for consumed licenses. So you must be 100% accurate, and Microsoft needs to know what your end clients consumed in total, so they know they're billing you correctly, that you're paying them correctly. It's simple. CSP hosting, under its updated terms, much simplified, only requires reporting 3 products: Windows Server, SQL Server, and System Center. You must report both bring your own license as a CSP hoster and license included services. And the reporting frequency is quarterly. It used to be monthly. It's now quarterly. It's much easier. But to be honest, other than for marketing analysis and potential use as a reference point in a compliance audit, we see no other reason why Microsoft requires reporting. Because Microsoft can see all these licenses already because they are sold. They're CSP licenses. They're not leased by providers. There is no way that provider may have made a mistake of not reporting licenses. If the license exists, if it's sold to a client, it's there. Microsoft sees it in its internal database. It's attached to the client's tenant. But nevertheless, it's a requirement. And if you want to participate in the CSP hoster program, you must comply with that requirement as well. Speaking about participation, the barrier to entry is still relatively high. You must be a SPLA partner, but you must also be a Tier 1 CSP, and Microsoft promised since 2 years ago that this will be relaxed. Please tell me if I'm wrong, but so far, to our information, it's not yet relaxed. You still have to be a Tier 1 CSP. So now you're listening to this and thinking, okay, I'm not a Tier 1 CSP. I don't want to become one. Is it anyhow relevant to me? Unless you are Amazon, Google, or Alibaba, you may allow your end clients to bring their licenses using the flexible virtualization benefit. You don't need to become a CSP hoster. It's almost the same with just a few differences. Firstly, you won't be allowed to activate the virtual machines, but the only friction point is that the end client will have to activate them themselves. You may still sell them CSP subscription licenses together with the virtual machines. Now, nobody stops you from doing that. And then the only difference with CSP hosting is that Windows Server calls will be required in all cases. There will be no exceptions. And if you're not a CSP hoster, there are no reporting requirements. However, please be careful with this when you think, okay, there are no reporting requirements. Because we strongly suggest all our clients, service providers, to track bring your own license internally anyway. If you start doing that, you will thank us for this advice when you get an audit letter from Microsoft. So you're welcome. Now, let's talk about the economics of CSP hosting, SPLA, and the flexible virtualization benefit. Let's quickly talk about economics because this is an interesting point as well. There are always two sides to the service provider economics. The end client costs, the cost to the end client, and the profitability for the service provider. And both are, unfortunately, not connected by the ability to offer compelling and competitive services. Competitive in many cases on price. So for the end client, bringing their existing licenses with software assurance that they may have inherited via legacy enterprise agreement is almost always cheaper than SPLA or license included options in CSP hosting. Consider that as a potential competitive advantage when there's a tender based on price. If you know what you're talking about, if you listen to this carefully, if you have more questions, you can always ask during the live or send us a message, email us to ask@SAMexpert.com. If you have any questions around this, we can always clarify it. You can read the articles on our website. Consider this as a potential financial advantage. You just need to understand how it works. You need to be able to ask your client whether they want to use the bring your own license option, whether they have an enterprise agreement licenses that they want to use. And it's really not rocket science. And potentially then you can offer a much lower price if you're happy to host them with their own licenses and you know how it works. Again, for the end client, when they only need a few virtual machines, it also may be cheaper to buy CSP licenses from you together with the virtual machines than the SPLA hosts. Than the SPLA costs. And the cost benefits here are not guaranteed actually. They are heavily dependent on your cloud architecture, as is number of hosts and cores, density of virtual machines, isolation of Windows Server virtual machines for SPLA, and other factors that affect the relative cost of a virtual machine in an environment. And an accurate commercial feasibility study actually is not difficult. It's not too difficult. We always suggest calculating, obviously. You want to embark on this journey, calculate and plan first and execute after. Don't just jump straight into it without careful preparation, because you may be surprised how much you can save even on SPLA costs, even before considering BYOL, if you architect your solution properly. Just yesterday, we discussed the case of a European provider, one of our clients that reduced its SPLA cost by 30%. By just following our advice that was given to them during multiple calls around reducing the number of calls, increasing the RAM in the machine, increasing the isolating Windows Server virtual machines through SPLA, they cut their cost by 30%. And they can now, if they need to, they can now pass it on to their end clients or keep this cost as the increased margins. The bottom line of everything I'm saying today is whatever you are told about the death of SPLA and the inevitable replacement with CSP hosting, take it with a pinch of salt. Please understand the commercial motivation of the person you're talking to. Don't just take it for granted. Think about what hidden agenda they may have. They may be just simple Microsoft fanboys. They may be interested in incentives, marketing incentives, or they may be just told by Microsoft, as a partner, you're only allowed to say this, and you're not allowed to say that. I used to be a Microsoft partner. I've been in that skin. So SPLA and CSP-Hosting or just BYOL, if you don't want to become a CSP hoster, they can coexist. And with a good commercial and architectural planning, a good mix of both worlds can provide benefits both to you and your end clients. That would be my concluding statement. We have a question. Let me try and take this. I hope it works. Andre, you should be able to talk. You need to unmute yourself.
Hi, Alexander. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Wonderful. I have a question. We offer a VGI service for the end user market, but Active Directory is shared across all the clients. How to license that? And second, bring your license for the end user market. This is possible. Okay.
Yes, I understand. So are those VDIs based on Windows Server or Windows 11?
We are looking for to do on Windows 11. If it's not possible, we're gonna move to Windows Server.
It's possible. It is possible, and it's possible due to flexible virtualization benefit. Licensing of Windows 11 in this case is quite interesting. It's not obvious. Your end clients must have the licenses. You can sell them to them, and that's your only option. There's no option through SPLA. That's your only option. You can host those VDIs for the end clients. Per licensing, it really doesn't matter whether you have a shared AD or you have different AD domains. It's all the same. But you must make sure that every user of the client has a necessary Windows 11 license. Where it gets complicated is licenses may come from different sources. They may have a legacy enterprise agreement, a current enterprise agreement, or CSP and PSA, so you need to understand all those intricacies. And although you may think, okay, fine, it's not my problem, it's their license, I would strongly suggest that you have this conversation and even write down, have a copy of the evidence of the licenses they have. Because if you get an audit, you will most probably have to prove it to the auditors that you have control around licenses used in that platform. Hope it makes sense.
But they must have the Windows 11 Enterprise, or can bring a Windows 11 Pro, for instance?
Enterprise on the current subscription. Yes, it's called remote virtualization. Each licensed user may use up to 4 virtual machines. That is not traceable, by the way, but that's the limitation. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you so much so far.
No worries. No worries. Thank you. And does anybody have any more questions? Well, I guess since nobody's asking any more questions. On this note, if you want us to send you a comparison between these licensing programs, it's a short white paper, just all these key points that I discussed today. Please email us at ask@SAMexpert.com or DM me through LinkedIn. Better email. I will still ask you to email because I just need to track, whom I sent it to. And on this note, please have a productive week and all the best in your service provider business. Thank you very much for being with us today again.